That time that my husband moved in with the woman across the street. Let's talk about it. So, this was at the end of my marriage, right? And this was probably this was the beginning of December. Now, the relationship was already done. We were pretty much just coexisting in the house. The marriage itself was over. And I already knew that he was dealing with somebody, really didn't care. But we had an agreement. And we had an agreement that we were going to stay in the house together until tax time, split the money, and then go our separate ways. He was going to stay in Florida. I was coming to North Carolina. So about a week before he left, I noticed that his pattern of behavior was changing. And so I said to him, if you plan on leaving before the agreement, can you let me know so that I can get things situated for the daycare for our twins? And he's like, oh, I'm not leaving yet. And I'm like, okay. But it didn't sit right. Knew that man since I was 15 years old. Yeah, you moving funny, buddy. I know you way too well. So I went ahead and I started putting things in place for the daycare to get set up for our twins. So it's a Sunday night, and he says to me, I'm leaving tomorrow. And I looked at him and I said, all right. I asked you to give me a heads up, but don't worry about it. I got it. So the next day, I come home, his stuff is gone. All right, cool. Don't think anything of it. You already told me you were leaving. But that evening, the kids come home and the kids end up coming in my room and they notice all his stuff is gone. So now they're looking at me like, what the? And I said, didn't your dad take y'all to school this morning? They say, yeah. I say, he didn't say anything to you? No. Nothing? No. Wow. Okay. So I had to explain to the children that he had moved out, that we were separating, that we weren't going to be together anymore. And prior to this, I had told him that we needed to wait until closer to when we were going to move because they were still fairly young. And I said, if it's not going to happen for a few months, it's going to be very confusing if we tell them now. We need to wait until about maybe a month or so before it happens and then let them know what's going on and prepare them. Obviously, it didn't work out that way. Now, I had a good idea of where he was at because I'm very observant, but I couldn't prove it. So 2 weeks go by and my daughter comes home and she was, I think about 11 at the time. My daughter comes home and she says, Ma, Bella said that her mom is Daddy's new girlfriend because he lives with them now. Now, see, Bella and her sister lived across the street from us, literally across the street and 2 doors down. And they rode the bus with my daughters. And I knew that's where he had went because, again, I'm observant. Now let me turn this into a part 2, and I'll tell you how I knew. Part 2, to the time that my husband moved in with the woman across the street. So, how I knew where he had went and what was going on. Now, I'm very observant. I'm very, very observant. And again, I had known this man since I was 15 years old, so I know your pattern of behavior. And I pay attention to my environment. A few weeks before the whole thing happened, one of my daughters made a comment about the girls from across the street being at our house in the mornings. Now, we have 5 children together, so we worked opposite shifts for many, many years. And at this point in time, I was doing early morning shifts. I had to be at work at like 7 in the morning. So he always got the kids off to school. He did more like a midday shift. So the kids had mentioned that this woman's daughters had been at our house in the mornings. And so when they said that to me, I asked them about it. And I said, why are her daughters coming over here in the mornings? And he's like, oh, her baby daddy got locked up. He was like locked up in a mental institution or something. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, well, I'm just trying to help her out. And, they had started talking like at the bus stop in the mornings when she'd walk her daughters to the bus stop and he'd be there with our kids. That's how they had, I guess, formed the friendship. And he was hanging out with her baby daddy prior to that man getting locked up. So I guess this is how their bond started. And I'm like, all right. I said, but why didn't you tell me? Oh, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? Why didn't you tell me that her kids were coming over here in the mornings? Like, why wouldn't you let me know that? I ain't think about it. I said, okay. But the real question is, why does she trust you so much? Oh, what you talking about? What you talking about? I said, that woman has girls. Little girls. Why does she trust you so much? What you talking about? I'm just helping her out. Again, the woman has daughters. Why does she trust you so much that she's leaving her daughters alone with you? I didn't get a straight answer. But that right there was enough. I knew right then that something was going on with them, because typically women don't just up and leave their daughters alone with a man at his house, even if there are other children present. It's dangerous. Now, in addition to that, before he left, her garage door was always up. Always. After he left, I never saw that garage door open, so I knew that he was parking his car in there. And then, of course, once, my daughter came home and told me, it confirmed what I already knew. And that is probably one of the craziest experiences of my life. I've had many, but that one was a wild one. But I wasn't even angry when I found out. It was funny because all my friends were like, oh, I can't believe you didn't go over there. I said, for what? For what? I'm done. I'm the one that ended this marriage. I don't want to be with that man no more. If she thinks she got a prize, then that's her prize. I don't care. I said, if I go over there and act up, that means I still feel some type of way. And I don't. I don't care. I just want to end this marriage and move on with my life. But what I did tell him was that if I had any doubts that I was making the wrong decision when I chose to leave that marriage, his decision to move in with the woman across the street confirmed that I absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt, made the right choice. And not once in the last 10 years have I ever regretted leaving that marriage. The day that my daughter came home and told me what the little girl had said to her on the bus about, my mom is your dad's new girlfriend, he lives with us now, I called him. And the first thing I said to him was, congratulations on being the first man to break your daughter's heart. And he said, oh, my kids are fine. I'll talk to my kids. I'm going to explain to my kids. And I said, see, it doesn't work like that. Children know what they see. They know what they see. They internalize what they see. They process what they see. Now, at the time when all of this happened, our oldest child, it was right before his 14th birthday. Like 2 months before his 14th birthday. And I remember one day him saying to me, Ma, I wish I could get a job so I could help you with the bills. And I just looked at him and I said, no, your job is to go to school and get your education. You let me worry about these bills. That's not for you to worry about. The youngest ones, the twins, were about 3 at the time, and the child above them, she was about 6, I think. And this conversation has come up so many times over the years they bring up the fact that their dad left and moved in with the woman across the street. The twins are 14 now and she's 17 now. And so there's so many times I'll hear them like making jokes about it. And we've had very candid conversations about what happened, because I didn't want them to misconstrue what they actually saw versus what the reality was of what was going on. Like, they've asked me before, was he cheating on you? And I had to explain to them that was not how the situation went down. Him and I had essentially already been separated. We were just coexisting in the house anymore. I didn't want them having the wrong picture of their father's actions and what he did. If you're gonna, judge him off what he did, judge him off the truth of what the situation was. I didn't want to paint it to be anything else. And even just maybe a month ago, my 17-year-old, my daughter, made a comment. It came up again about what their father did. And she said, at this point, I don't even care. She said, we don't need him anyways. And we have a dad, which they do. And he's been in their life for the last 5 years. They've kind of written their biological father off. They're just like, whatever. We don't care. We don't need him. But his decision that day when he decided to move in with that woman across the street will forever impact our children psychologically. And he's never going to be able to undo the damage that he did when he made that choice. And you're right. Far too many people do not think about how their choices are going to affect their children when they do the things that they do in their relationships. And that is also why you have so many adults out here walking around with so much hurt and pain because of things that they witnessed and internalized because their parents didn't give any second thought about how their actions was going to impact that child and that child's life. There were a lot of things that contributed to the end of the marriage. And it really started off on the wrong foot to begin with. Got married for the wrong reasons. I did. I can't speak for him. I got married for the wrong reasons. But I will say that my biggest contributing factor that I can see, after I left, I did a lot of introspection and a lot of reflection and just looking back over events that happened within the marriage and looking at it from a different perspective. Towards the end, we had gotten to an argument and he brought up something that I said to him at 19 years old. And for me, that was my aha moment. That was my realization that I had cut that man so deep with my words that he had never gotten over what I said to him when I was 19. And here it was 11 years later, and he was still hurt and holding on to what I said at 19. And from that, when I had that realization, I learned that I had to learn how to start watching my mouth. That I couldn't just say the first thing that popped up in my head. That just because I'm angry was not a reason for me to say hurtful things to my partner. And so I had to learn how to start working on my communication. I had to learn how to articulate my feelings. I had to learn how to have emotional control. Now, what he feels like the contributing factors may have been, I don't know. But just from me reflecting over the years and how he brought it up that night and seeing that he still was so angry and upset from that, I believe that because my words cut him so deep, there was a part of him that began to resent me. And obviously he lost respect for me. And that was clear in other things that happened throughout the marriage and over the years, and obviously in the way that he left. But I would say that for me, that was probably my biggest contributing factor to the demise of the marriage. My marriage absolutely helped me understand the reality of relationships. But that's because I did the work. I didn't leave the marriage and then blame him for everything that happened. And there was actually a time after he had moved out, I asked him to come to the house and have a conversation with me. And in hindsight, I can see how my timing was probably not the best timing, but I was done. I was done. So when he came to the house, I asked him, I said, hey, let's have a conversation and let's figure out where we went wrong so that in the future we don't repeat these mistakes with our next partner. And again, I get that the timing probably wasn't the best. Obviously, he was not receptive to that conversation. But I did it anyways, not with him. I left and I began to do it myself. I began to look over things that had happened throughout the marriage. And it was a man that I befriended after I left. We became very good friends. We're still very, very good friends to this day. And I tell that man all the time, like, you helped me with my healing in ways that you will never understand. But him and I used to have so many conversations, and I would tell him about different things, and he would give me a male perspective, and I would sit that night and think about what he said and reflect on the situations that had happened throughout the marriage and think about how I could have responded differently, think about what I did that contributed to those situations happening, trying to figure out how I came about having certain feelings and behaviors and accepting certain behaviors. And I really went down a healing process of fixing myself, because when I left, the one thing I told myself was that I'm not going to repeat this pattern. I'm not going to do this again. And I will not spend 11 years again in a marriage for it to end the way that this one ended. I refused to repeat that pattern. And I have not repeated that pattern. So I think being honest with yourself is the absolute best thing that you can do. But so many people don't have the ability to be honest with themselves because they lack self-awareness. It's a whole lot easier to point the finger at everybody else around you and say they're the reason why you're hurting. They're the reason why you feel like this. They're the reason why your life looks like this. Than to say, hey, you know what? My choices create my reality. And the only thing that I control in this world are my decisions and how I choose whether I'm going to react or respond to the things around me. And once more people start to learn that and implement that, they will find that they have better life experiences overall. A lot of y'all keep asking me that same question. A lot of y'all. And the answer is, I don't know. And I don't care. It kind of scares me that so many people do not understand the difference between accountability and blame. Being able to identify how your behaviors contributed to something is not the same thing as blaming somebody else for something happening or blaming yourself for something happening. Understanding that you may have had behaviors that were toxic or ineffective or hurtful, and saying, I take accountability for the things that I may have said or done that hurt that individual, is not blaming yourself. Nor does that absolve the other person of being accountable for what they may have said or done that hurt you. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with being able to stand up and say, hey, these things that I did, I recognize it probably had a hurtful impact on that other person. And it doesn't take away from what they did. And this is why a lot of y'all struggle out here, because you don't know the difference between accountability and blame. And that's a little scary.
Hi family, how are you all doing? Let me hope you're doing great. Thank you so much for your support. Thank you for watching. And if you're new, please go ahead and subscribe and hit that notification bell. Don't forget to leave your thoughts and opinions down below in the comment section. This has been an interesting video of this lady sharing her divorce story, but most importantly, how shameful it is for a man to go for a woman just literally across the street where they live. To me, that was crazy. Of all the women in the world, really choosing a woman next to you guys is crazy. But that's marriage. Things don't work out sometimes, and I agree with her that sometimes you have to really think about the things. Ask yourself these questions. It doesn't mean that you're blaming yourself or whatever, but accountability is also a very important part if you want to grow, if you have a dream of getting married again and starting a new family, a new partnership with a new person. Doing self-reflection and taking accountability of what you participated in, of what you did to bring the marriage to an end, is a very good step in the right direction. So those women saying that, oh, it's you blaming yourself, no, it's taking accountability and growing. That is called growth. When you do that self-reflection and put in the work to learn and improve yourself, for your better person that you meet in the future, is a very important thing. But yes, that's the video for today. I hope you learned something, and see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching, and please leave your thoughts and opinions down below in the comment section.